The other day we were looking at a 1957 television magazine, Practical Television, um, and it's interesting. Some of the stuff in there is still buildable today. There was a tuner to receive band 1, band 3 and band 2. You could build that as band 2 and still receive entertainment radio on it, which would be an interesting project. Or Valve, of course, from 1957. So one of the things that brought me to electronics, I was kind of always interested, but when I left primary school and went to secondary school, I'm from Yorkshire, and it was Rotherham in Yorkshire. My dad was a doctor of chemistry working at British Steel's very swish research laboratories set out in acres and acres of parkland, where they employed 26 gardeners and had one of only 3 in the world million-volt electron microscopes at the time. Mother was a hospital specialist in Sheffield, embarrassingly, in sexual health. Anyway, I was interested in electronics, and so when I was 10 and between these two schools, during the summer holidays, a friend of mine, we were out playing on bikes, and there was some building site that dug the foundations, and dumped in the foundations was a bundle of magazines, and they comprised of practical electronics, comprised of practical wireless and radio and electronics constructor, if you remember that. And I found this absolutely fascinating, so I took them back home, and my mother said, "Oh yeah, my father used to take those in the 1930s." So there you go. Anyway, I found it really, really interesting. I wondered if it was still in print. Now, the last magazine in that dumped set was January 1974, so they weren't that far out. Some pages had been pulled out, but they were nevertheless very interesting. And so I said to my mum, "I wonder if it's still available." So when we went into town, we went to a newsagent's, and they said, "Well, we do have it, but it's the current issue's sold out, and the new one will be in like a week's time." And so the new one did indeed arrive, and it was May 1974. I do have the tatty copy somewhere, but I've printed off this one from our favourite download site. And so this is the first practical wireless I actually bought, this magazine, and it kind of started the interest in electronics. So there we go. And one of the first things I needed was a soldering iron, and I did buy an Antex, and I bought it from a electrical shop, Westgate, Rotherham, and it was this kit one here, where you got the soldering iron, a little reel of solder, and some different tips. About 2 years later, I needed to change the element in it. I had to buy another soldering iron to unsolder the element in the first soldering iron. At least by this issue, they'd moved on to having the index page straight from the cover, because the earlier ones, it was somewhere about there. So you get a plethora of adverts. RSC had quite a number of shops, including one at Sheffield, and I did buy some components there at once. I bought the 5-watt amplifier module, used Motorola transistors from by pre-pack, that worked fine. Of course, there's Maplin's in its early days. Greenweld, always buying stuff from Greenweld. Packages of surplus components. Pity I was too young to have a car and go to Paget's old radio store and buy lots of television sets. Because I did later have a television shop for about 6 years. These were a load of... Is the word crap? Thank you. RTVC, radio television components. And they had a chap there who was quite clever at designing things around surplus modules. And they seem to... Look at that. Tape record. A reel-to-reel tape deck for £4. Wow. Built the later version of that. think I had a few things from Electrotech. It tended to be more electromechanical. Home radio, not the cheapest, but frustratingly, they didn't always have things in stock, and then they wanted postage again when you reordered one item. Yeah. Never used Arrow. Never used them. Never used RST valve mail order, still going as Landerex and Co. Bypack, had a few things from them. Heathkit, and it was at that time, is it pronounced Schlumberger, or is it Schlumberger? I don't know how it's pronounced. We've got a test set, which is one of theirs. It's a 4040. It's on one of the other benches. We don't use it for CB. Look at that. In those days, you could build yourself a light dimmer for £2.90 in kit form. Transistor Universal Amplification Company. Lewis Radio are always doing surplus chassis from, no doubt somebody manufactured too many radiogram chassis and they sold on the surplus. Printed circuit board etch resist transfers. They were a new thing then. Here's Heathkit. What am I on about? Here's Sinclair. You could build the Sinclair Cambridge electronic calculator for just $24.95. You've got to appreciate that this time you could have it fully built for $29.95. With VAT it was $32.95 for the built calculator. It was actually smaller than, that is bigger than the actual size. It was quite small and ran on AAA batteries. I mean, somebody at school had one. And it was, wow, it was like a godlike thing to have a calculator. My dad brought a desktop calculator home from work. It was 1969 model. So it's only 4 or 5 years before. And it cost them £550 and took half an hour to warm up. And it was solid state, but with Nixie tubes. I also got an article here about the 100 years on and all that kind of stuff. And you've got the new stuff. An oscilloscope trace doubler to build. Michael Dramfield's covered this firm. Of course, he got an oscilloscope in for repair, and it was one which had been originally part of this tuition course. You built the oscilloscope, and I think he had to have a transformer made for it. So, yeah. Ambit International became Circuit and then became Broxbourne. Are they still around or have they died a death? Another commentary. Was this... Didn't Nissan do a... No, it was a Triumph PI. There was a Nissan with... I think it was the Laurel with radar in its wing mirrors. Talk about Marconi and the Going Back series they used to run. I've done the Take 20. I've scanned the Take 20s from every magazine that Take 20 was in. The idea was that it was building small projects with no less than 20 components. Originally, it was also at a cost of no more than 20 shillings. So 20 shillings, a shilling is 5 pence for younger people. So 12 old pennies to the pound, 20 shillings to the pound, 240 pennies to the pound. See what happens when you're my kind of age. I had to relearn it all, but I don't have to divide by 12 like you did with the pre-decimal system. So by the time we went decimal, it was, see, 5 shillings 25 pence. They dropped the less than a pound thing. Now here's the thing, car cassette audio booster. So this project, obviously a lot of home cassette players of the, shall we say, the shoebox type variety are, as it says here, between 250 and 750 milliwatts output, which is inadequate for car use. I mean, I've shoved a cassette player on the seat, and you get some speed up, even like 40, and you can't hear it over the road noise. So what this does, it's an amplifier which is 5 watts output, and it uses the AD161A62, AD162, and it boosts your car audio up to a usable level. So nifty project. Printed circuit board to make, and there we are. So, Josty kits, I remember those, but never had any. I remember Burkitt's on the straight Lincoln, having them to clear we were doing an organ nearby when I was doing my apprenticeship in pipe organ restoration, and it was only a stone's throw from the church we were working at. So I kind of went out for a sandwich at lunch, and I saw those kits in the window, and that would be 1981. There's a pull-out supplement here. I've printed a second copy of that off, so we can have a look at that. But it's nice for that to be in, because they get pulled out and discarded, don't they? Next month we're going to have a sound to light display for your disco. Just use things using the S deck. Some tutorial. That was a popular set of books. If you're people my age will remember it, in a kind of cartoony, fun way of presenting electrical theory. Rechargeable batteries, nickel cadmium. Wow. Wired intercoms. Henry's from Edgware Road. So I built 3 of these. Had a friend, David, at secondary school, and he decided he was going to spend his birthday money on building a radio, and so we built this together on my kitchen table, and it worked. It uses the Z414, which is these days the MK474, which was a Ferranti thing, so it's a TRF radio in one device, and it runs on 1.5 volts. So a lot of what you'd think were transistor radios sold today use one of those, but it's now the MK474. Not the best performing thing, because it's a TRF. It's not a super het. So because it's 1.5 volts and it's running on a 9-volt battery, they've put a preset in here so that you can get the 1.5 volts spot on. And then it uses a Motorola MFC 4000B. So you've got a BC109 as a preamp, and you've got an MFC 4000B as a power amp, which is a 4-legged device, and they're 250 milliwatts. I must say it's the quietest 250 milliwatts I've ever heard, and I don't think it's a reliable chip. Back then they were 85 pence, but you have to pay a bit more from them these days. You can get them, but they were troublesome to get even at the time. You can get them today. MFC 4000A, I think, is a totally different IC altogether. Anyway, we built this one for him, and then subsequently I bought one. Many years later, I built this for him when we were like 11 or 12, and then I built one when I was about 19 just for a laugh, and then I built another one in the 1990s. Probably got all the parts together to make yet another one. And it uses 0.15 Vero, which was hard to get even then. You're winding your own ferrite rod. RS Components do 0.15 Vero board, but it's not plain. It's got strips. It's got the strips on it. So if you want to have it plain, you have to etch the strips off it, which seems wasteful. But anyway, you can build it. You can build this today. It would cost you 30 quid. This was a clever project. It's part 3, but this is a clever project. So there's your Philips cassette player in the top of this unit, and it was a tuner amplifier, half decent stereo, and you could also play your tapes through it. And this one, it's the stereo decoder they're doing, based around a CA3090Q. Q is quad in line, so most ICs like this are dual in line, but these have got 4 rows of pins, they're quad in line. You can probably see the offset of the pins with the IC. There's the drilling things for the front panel. A crossword. I was never any good at crosswords. Oscilloscope techniques with lots of valves. Supplies at Sheffield. Well, I mean, they weren't that far from me, and there was a gentleman who worked in the electronics department at my dad's place to work at the British Steel Research Laboratories, and I'll tell you, his name was Neville Kirk, and his radio ham call sign was G3JDK. He was a legendary radio ham, and he introduced me to amateur radio as a 14-year-old, and he introduced me to supplies, and I had a lot of it was American military surplus, believe it or not. But you know, getting a 250 volt DC HT power supply for £1 plus VAT, you know, pretty good going. Oh, I've ended up with my church services getting bound. I wondered where they'd gone. The printer must have paused, done the other print job, gave me, and that's next Sunday services hymns and a funeral in a couple of weeks. New out liquid crystal displays. That was the very, very latest thing. There's the Radio Society of Great Britain still publishing books. Didn't deal with either of those. Radio component specialist. I did have HT transformers from them from time to time. I've never been interested. I maybe have been a radio ham since 1979, but I've never been interested in all this shortwave news. Not interested. My idea of DX is 65 miles FM on 4 meters. Back then you could be getting yourself a ex-British Telecom telephone, and you could buy the dial for 27.5 pence. Yes, we had half pences then. The Texan amplifier was a practical wireless project from 1971, and then the author did a matching tuner. I think, yeah, it's Varicap, and it was a wireless world project from June 73. So you see, with this information, you can build that from 1971, and you can still build it today, and you can build that from Wireless World in 1973. I bought an incomplete kit of one of those about 15 years ago. When I get retired and pack in doing this, I'm going to build that. Incomplete kits, you see, doesn't matter because we know it's in June 1973 Wireless World, so the parts you haven't got you can buy. HAC was never interested. It was heard all continents, wasn't it? Often mostly one valve sets. Back onto the pages of shortwave. David Gibson G3 JDG was legendary, but it didn't interest me, that subject. Become a radio amateur. Well, I did it a different way. Run your own hi-fi store. Tandis were just setting up in this country. Of course, have gone now. Laskis, not just Edgware Road, but on some high streets. And selling. Were they still selling illegal walkie-talkies back? Yes, they were. They were selling illegal walkie-talkies. These 100 milliwatt, probably 27 meg walkie-talkies, $24.95 a pair. Absolute rip-off. And we're going back to a time when you earned 16 quid a week. And of course they were illegal anyway, which, you know. 300 milliwatt, £52 a pair. And 1 watt ones, £71 a pair. License required for use in the UK because you couldn't get a license. What a con. And of course they'll say up to quarter of a mile range, and of course the words up to when you talk about radio means at sea. You could earn up to £1,604 a year with this organisation. One day I might achieve that. Partridge Electronics seemed to go into talkback systems, didn't they, for broadcast. I sent away for this, and it was very out of date even back then. These projects were a load of crap. We were selling the tab books, which the American books are very good. Electro Value, dealt with them a few times. Long gone. Eddystone, advertising there. They've got an active aerial. Collimore, I think they're still going. Saxon Electronics, somebody else doing disco type equipment. Amtron, another kit which came and went. I'd be a bench engineer at Sony at Leeds. My goodness, he was getting 2,054 quid. Service sheets. Men, £70 per week can be yours. And the small lads are still doing kits for the Texan amplifier from 3 years back, as in that other advertisement. 12-volt fluorescent lights, build your own. Advertising Sister Magazine Practical Electronics. Z&I Aero Services did the Xerox range of valves. Watford Electronics, they ended up doing computer things and they ended up folding. Then, is that Aldermaston College at Aldermaston Court, that big posh house that they rented some space in? I once sent to them for a prospectus. There you go. And finally, Henry's on the back cover on Edgware Road. So there you are. That was the first magazine, electronics magazine, I actually bought as a. I'd have been 11, wouldn't I? I was born in end of '62. So 11/12. Fantastic. Thanks for watching.